Welcome to Brute Facts. Tonight I got a special guest, Dr. Tyler McNabb. He is assistant professor of philosophy at University of St. Joseph in Macau, former assistant professor of philosophy at Houston Baptist University. He has a PhD from the University of Glasgow, philosophy of religion. His specialties, epistemology and comparative philosophy. I actually have his book over here on religious epistemology. It is a short read, but a very good read. And I have all of the descriptions in the bottom, as well as in the comment section, as well as a link to his page, his Phil Papers page, and his books. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's going to be a fun one. Hang tight, and I'll be right back with Dr. McNabb.
Welcome to the Brute Facts Podcast with your host and everybody's favorite Christian, Eddie Kroom. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell for future content.
Hello, hello. How are you doing, Dr. McNabb?
Hey, great. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely.
I saw that the adult beverages part, and it was making me wish I had a cider with me. Strongbow, you know.
Well, beer is part of it. It's beard, brains, and beards, and you only need one. And of course, the most
I've got a little beard right now. I got a little one. So,
but I stopped kind of advertising it because I had a few Christian guests who were real uncomfortable with it. So I was okay. Well, I'll just let them bring it if they want it.
Well, I'm a Catholic, so alcohol is part of my religion.
That's my favorite kind right there. Yeah, this is to the Catholics. So I was telling you in the backstage, I kind of grew up fundamentalist, and we just kind of cultural Christians, and they sent us to a fundamentalist church. But my brother got married to a Catholic in a Catholic church and had the reception in the basement. And that was the first time I'd ever drank a beer at a church. It felt weird.
Wow.
It was like the priest was over there, like just hammering Bud Lights. And I was like, this is my kind of jam. I like this. So.
Yeah, I remember, when I was at Glasgow, alcohol was at all the events. And so then I went from Glasgow to HBU, and it's a Baptist, university, and no alcohol on policy. And I was just like, well, where's all the alcohol, guys? Where's the wine? Where's the cider?
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Have you always been a Christian? When did you become a Christian? Were you raised a Christian?
Right. Thanks for the question. So in my theology, I was baptized, and by being baptized, I was made a Christian. When, I don't know, I was 12 or something like that. I was raised in a Baptist home, though, Southern Baptist home from, I'm from the great country of Texas. So pretty much your Southern Baptists are Catholic in Texas. Yeah. I didn't get super serious about my faith, though. Said some prayers most nights, went to church on and off. So I was we went to church more than Creasters, right? Those people who go to church just Christmas and Easter, but not much more, right?
Creasters, so, I like that.
I don't know, maybe like 5 times a year or something, like 6 times a year. You know, that's kind of but we did have like 6-7 Bibles in the house. So,
oh, nice.
For only 4 people, so still made that out. But when I was a senior in high school, I started all of a sudden questioning my faith, and kind of had a crisis, and started doubting everything, and was just kind of like, hey, if there's no reason to believe, right? If this is just blind faith, I can't do that. Right. And I thought at the time, as most seniors in high school probably would, I thought, well, hey, if God doesn't exist, then objective moral values don't exist, and there's no objective meaning, and I'm just gonna basically live life how I see fit, get the most happiness that I can get out, and then I'll die and cease to be. And then I was like, but I'm not gonna go that way just yet, right? So I ended up like Googling proofs for God's existence, right? Came across some Old Testament passages, like Isaiah 53, where when I read it, all of a sudden I started finding myself believe that this was Jesus, even though this was written, long before Jesus. And so I started reading these Old Testament passages that seem to speak of Christ, and this all of a sudden started to really move me. Yes, Texas represent. God bless the great country. I found myself late to school the next day, and was like, you know what? I'm already late. Screw it. I'm going to pull over. And I pulled over in my Ford Focus and to a Starbucks coffee shop area, and was like, I believe this is your word, but is Jesus really God? And I did the unpardonable sin of randomly closing my eyes and flipping open scripture and pinpointing to see if Jesus was God, and whatever that was going to say, all right, that's where I would be led. And thankfully it wasn't like Jesus got tired. Jesus slept. But Jesus got hungry. It was actually a passage by God's grace that seemed to really convey Jesus' deity. And so I read the passage, and it was in reference to calming the seas, and even the seas obeying them, and the disciples freaking out. And I was just like, hey, wow, Jesus is God. It's portraying Jesus as God. And all of a sudden I found myself filled with the Holy Spirit, and just I could feel God tangibly. Immense happiness and joy just took over my heart. Wow. And I felt God's presence. Wow. So like I was changed, and I would come home from school, and I would start listening to biblical commentaries and lectures, and about a couple months later after that, I started street evangelizing at the local mall, and I quickly realized that apologetics was kind of something I should get into, and so I got into kind of like really lay level, surface level apologetics. Right, I remember buying Josh McDowell's Evidence That Demands a Verdict or something like that. It was a really, really big book, and I was just like eating it up, and then I got into Michael Brown's 4-part series of on answering Jewish objections to Jesus, and that played a big role in my faith. And eventually, I started. Sorry, should I shut up now or keep going?
No, go ahead. I'm loving it. It's
okay.
I love hearing people's testimonies.
Sorry, I totally went Baptist on you. Just like boom.
Is there going to be an altar call? Or,
and so, you got to ask Pope Francis into your heart in addition to Jesus, though.
Oh, so, that's right.
Notice that. I started. I went to a very liberal Baptist university, not knowing it was liberal. And I went there and was like basically getting taught Jesus seminar, liberation theology, hardcore on steroids. And I was just like, okay, well, wait a minute. I have to do apologetics again, right? Not just for street evangelism, for actually going to school. And so I started, again, grappling with apologetics. And it wasn't until after a year later, I transferred to another university and to Criswell College. And it's a good Southern Baptist college, loves Jesus, and has some great thinkers, great scholars. And I had a friend who knew I street evangelized, and we started evangelizing together. And he started using philosophy when he was street evangelizing. I was just like, what is this? Like, I've been doing kind of basic evidential stuff, mostly historical stuff. I've never understood this philosophical stuff. So I just started it up and getting involved in it. However, I quickly bought into a really, really bad epistemology, where it was like, in order to know anything, and I'm going to have a friend right now who's going to want to have a word with me after I say this is bad epistemology, but that if S knows that P, then it's such that S can't be wrong about P, right? So sort of this strong infallibilism. And so I was just like, well, what if,
Right.
what if God doesn't exist? And, I just kept imagining myself running into a philosophy professor, right? At the time I was a biblical studies major. And, him just schooling me in philosophy. And then all of a sudden I'd be like, well, I don't know God exists anymore. I don't have my faith anymore. And, I wasted the last 10 years of my life. Right.
Yeah.
And I just kept imagining that scenario. And it always seemed possible that there could be some objection that would undercut my reasons for believing in God. And I went through a major crisis for about a year where I kept holding my faith. I held on to it firmly. I still did ministry and evangelized. But God seemed very far from me. I didn't feel his presence so tangibly anymore.
Right.
And doubts, I constantly had to sort of put down doubts. And then finally, honestly, one day it just disappeared about a year later. It disappeared. It was about a year of a season. And I remembered that the times I felt like I most strongly believed, the firmness of my belief was as strong as it could be, was times when I saw Jesus in the Old Testament. And that's kind of interesting because that's kind of how I came to faith in part. Right. And so I was real big into a biblical scholar named John Sailhammer, right? And some people might know who Brother Childs is. So I kind of went this route with biblical theology. Then there was another time when I almost got in a car accident. And it was raining really bad in Dallas one day. I was living in Dallas at the time. And all of a sudden, in peace, right, serenity, the presence of God, I felt as God's existence as I ever had, and just kind of came over me. And then the next day, though, it was gone. Then I started existential crisis. So, I noticed that. But long story short, I was getting out of the season, getting more firm in my faith. The doubts were less and less. Ended up going to graduate school and reading Alvin Plantinga's Warranted Christian Belief. And all of a sudden, I realized that I could know that God exists even apart from argumentation. You were hooked. So this whole time, I was like this hard evidentialist standard, right? I don't think at the time I was an infallibilist, but I was still kind of more sympathetic with that route, And I was just eating up Warrant Proper Function, Warrant Christian Belief, and I was like, this is the stuff that I want to spend a good portion of my career sort of defending. And so it ended up getting me into doing a PhD in philosophy and master's in philosophy of religion, and so that's basically kind of my story.
Well, that's cool. You knocked out 2 questions with one story. So that was going to be, how did you get into philosophy? But there we go. Yes,
I asked St. Alvin into my heart, and
that's it. Hey, I'm going to tell you what, that is a brilliant man. That is, I read, what was the condensed version?
Knowledge and Christian Belief?
Yes, Knowledge and Christian Belief. And it was all new to me. So I had to like read it, and then I'm really ADHD, so I would read the chapter and only really catch part of it.
Sure.
Then go back and read it again. So it took me forever to get through it. But when I did, it really started clicking, and I was like, because I've told people, time and time again, even if I wasn't a Christian, I would be a deist or something, because I've always just found myself believing,
Right.
So I really resonated with Plain and Go when he was talking about, like looking out at the beauty of the skies and just automatically just thinking God. He never reasoned himself to a God existing. Right. So I was really drawn to his work, which is how I got introduced to you and Andrew Moon and some others. I kind of got hooked from the first time I started reading him, but I've since left the Reformed epistemology faith a little
Don't
bit.
Do that. Don't do that.
I'm working on, I'm hoping that Swinburne, gets this bridge for me between externalism and internalism. And
so I've actually talked to Swinburne about Reformed epistemology, and he seemed quite open to actually endorsing a proper functionalist account of warrant and the idea that sometimes, at least for some individuals, if they have a really powerful religious experience, that can, and naturally just sort of forms a belief that could be enough. Right. So when I was talking to Swinburne, it really came across that he was Reformed epistemology, or he affirmed it. It's just that he thought it was uninteresting, and wanted to. So he didn't identify that so publicly, writing about that and so forth, because he didn't. He wanted to talk about justification, and he wanted to talk about probabilities for most people, who don't have strong religious experiences and so forth. So
that's
you can go both.
I'm going through his epistemic justification now, and he kind of makes a distinction between synchronic and diachronic beliefs, and he seems like he's kind of putting together an idea of internal and external justification together, based on the belief when they have it, and the short term and how they came to have the belief versus the long term, and I guess their epistemic duty or something. But talking to Swinburne, is he as hard to understand talking to him as listening to his lectures? Because I have a hard time following him. It's not so much the accent; I just have a hard time following him. He's I think he's just on this whole other level that I'm just not there yet.
I enjoyed talking with him, and I actually have a fun story about I was driving him because we were hosting him at HBU, and I was driving him in the car, and I thought, you know what, I can't get back this moment, right? I mean, Swinburne and I talked about philosophy a lot, don't get me wrong, but I was like, I have the potential to have a really funny story right now. In Houston, I'm from Houston. I was brought up in Houston rap, right, on Houston rap, and I was like, I'm going to play some Chameleon Air.
Oh no!
And I'm going to blare it really loud, and I'm going to tell him beforehand that I want to know his opinion and what he thinks of this. So I started blaring the Sound of Revenge, really loud driving. And about 30 seconds into it, I looked over and I was like, so what do you think? And he's just like, no comment.
I picture him with sitting in his librry with a fireplace and an expensive cigar and classical music.
He's awesome.
He politely declined my invitation to come on the show. Okay. But them guys, man. He's so many invitations. It's
I know. And Swinburne is awesome. I praise God for him and all the work that God has done through him, and he's a tremendous guy, and a guy who I've could ask advice for, and he gives it. I mean, he has a real heart for the Lord and for his church.
Yeah, we just got to look past the open theism thing, and no, he's a cool guy for sure.
I'm a Thomist, so I'm not an open theist, but
I'm not sure where I'm at on Thomism because he's so hard to understand. I started with Ed Fazer, and he lost me quick. So I went to Peter Kreeft, and he does such a better job of explaining it. So now I feel like I'm on the level I can go to Ed Fazer. Listen to his stuff.
So you got to read Kreeft, then read Fazer.
Yeah,
and then read more advanced works of Fazer or some.
Yes. It's the thing is, I mean, Thomas Aquinas was so brilliant, man. He just his level of abstractness is just out of this world, and trying to follow him, it's and
to think that he thought that the Summa Theologica was like something basic for everyone.
Yeah,
it's just
it's like this is crap. I can't even finish it. I'm not even going to finish it. It just Well, I like how he kind of tried to marry the empiricism and the rationality, the you know what I mean. They're trying to kind of make it make sense. So, and I'm kind of a middle of the road guy. I don't like to hang out on the extremes. Let's find something that'll, let's make it make sense. So, no, go ahead.
So here's what you could do, since you want to kind of have both worlds. You can do what I do. So I endorse an internalist theory about justification, but an externalist theory about warrant.
There you go.
And so phenomenal conservatism, right, is basically advocates that, I can be justified, or at least have some justification for my belief, if it appears to me that P, and I don't have a defeater for P, right? So if it appears to me that there's a water bottle here, right, I have a strong experience that inclines me to believe that there's a water bottle here, right? And I don't have a defeater for thinking for believing that there's a water bottle. So I have some justification for it. So I primarily understand justification, kind of old school. I understand it like deontologically, if I'm within my epistemic rights in affirming something. But nonetheless, I need like a much tighter connection to truth when it comes to reference to knowledge and so forth. Right. So then that's when the externalism, proper functionalism stuff kicks in, which is what I spend most of my time thinking about, because I like knowledge a lot more than justification. Right. So I'm kind of opposite of Swinburne.
Right. That's it, and I'm very sympathetic to phenomenal conservatism. I mean, it just makes sense that if something seems to me to be the truth, then it's more plausible to, believe what seems to be true. So I think seemings are, very powerful. And I don't, I've heard arguments against phenomenal conservatism, but, on the surface of it, I'm pretty sympathetic to it because, I don't know how you could deny something that seems to be true to you. I mean, why somebody wouldn't be justified in what seems to be true to them.
At least at first glance, right? I mean, it's like you have some justification before you get it stripped away or something from a defeater. But yeah.
So I get the epistemology. I love epistemology.
Right.
And the philosophy of religion, but the comparative philosophy. What's in its in Asian philosophy? Is that?
Yes, some of it. Yeah.
Okay.
So well, it started off. My interest in comparative philosophy was related to epistemology. So, there's this one objection against Plantinga's religious epistemology that goes something like this. Plantinga's religious epistemology is significantly weakened, given the fact that other serious religious traditions can utilize the epistemology to say the same thing that Plantinga does.
Right. So kind of pluralism.
Right. Yeah, except so it's kind of like the Great Pumpkin objection, but it's a more serious objection. It's applied to specifically world religious, serious religious traditions, traditions that people actually sincerely believe, right? Instead of the Great Pumpkin. And so I was like, well, that doesn't seem so. I just took a graduate course on world religions, and I was like, that doesn't seem right. It seems like there are certain preconditions that are needed to make intelligible Plantinga's proper functionalism. And there's lots of religious traditions that seem to lack them. So, for example, it seems like you need a designer or something like a designer. And obviously you have certain Eastern traditions that, at least contemporarily glossed, are atheistic, right? Mm-hmm. So, pantheistic, and there's religious traditions that don't emphasize having faculties that are successfully aimed at truth. Right. And so I was all of a sudden I was like, oh no, someone needs to write on this to respond to this objection, because it seems like a bad objection. So that's what I did with my PhD thesis, and turned part of that into a book with Eric Baldwin, and that's our Plantingian Religious Epistemology and World Religions book, where it's kind of like we analyze the epistemology and worldviews of the various religious traditions. A couple versions of Hinduism and Buddhism and Taoism and Confucianism. And so that kind of is responsible for that. But I started also getting interested in what these religious traditions can offer Christians, one. And so I co-wrote with a student of mine, a former student at HBU, Joan Blatto, where we talked about how certain insights from Confucianism and contemporary psychology actually seem to point in a direction that God would likely set up how we worship him and know him with like robust rituals. And so here's sort of, it's an argument for high liturgical use. Okay. And that's in Theologica. And then also I was lecturing in a comparative philosophy class that I was teaching that semester. That paper came from it, but also the book that I've now co-authored with Baldwin again. He's the guy I co-authored the Religious Epistemology World Religion one with. I was lecturing one day and I was like, wait a minute. You have guys like Brian Davis and David Bentley Hart conceiving God as not a thing, right? In fact, David Bentley Hart says God is no thing, right? God's nothing, right? And God's not like a being like you and I, but God is existence itself. God is being, right? Right. And then I started reading, more Buddhist literature, and I realized, wait a minute. While Buddhism has a history, right, of developing arguments against theism, and especially as it developed and evolved, they would say more precise things about God not existing and so forth. I thought, if you just take a minimalistic approach to Buddhism, actually, I think it might be consistent with classical theism. And there's minimalist approaches, like, for example, by Jay Garfield in his Engaging Buddhism, he lists out a formula. Same would be with someone like Westerhoff or Burton. And then, going back to some of the early, more primary texts, right, there is a very minimalistic sort of approach. And I think it's because it follows directly from the Four Noble Truths. And so we were just like, wait a minute, I think there's something here. So we wrote a book kind of saying, hey, if you want to be a Buddhist, but you also want to be a theist, it's okay. And so we try to synthesize the two views. And we kind of just at the end say, is this consistent with Catholicism also? Like, I'll leave that up to theologians. Who am I? I'm but a mere philosopher. But it does seem like you can be a classical theist and a Buddhist as well.
What is, I know Buddhism is very down the line with idealism, if it's not idealism itself.
So you have certain Buddhist traditions very much that would follow that.
So it was it Buddhism that it came from Hinduism, right? Or
it came from India.
It's kind of like a philosophy that branched from Hinduism.
It responds to various conceptions of Hinduism. So like in Hinduism, a lot of the Buddhist arguments against God are basically taking the Hindu conceptions of God and are responding to that.
I didn't know they argued against God.
Yes.
That's
So they have like the problem of evil, but they have more objections in the problem of evil. They have their own various unique sort of Buddhist objections to God.
That kind of reminds me of, when Sam Harris and the psychologist, the one everybody likes to jump on,
Jordan Peterson.
Jordan Peterson. When Jordan Peterson sat there patiently and drew out what Sam Harris was getting at with his moral landscape, and he's like, that sounds a lot like heaven and hell. And I was just like, wow, because if you look at a lot of these different kind of secular philosophies, they seem to have this type of good and evil, and this pinnacle of good we're trying to reach, and this evil or suffering or what it is we're trying to not get to. And it's like it's this almost the same message repackaged,
right?
And it seems to be in a lot of different, not just religions, but secular philosophies too. It's like, we want what the Bible teaches. We just don't want to call it that, and we don't want to say it comes from the Bible.
Right.
But yeah, that's interesting. I knew there had to be a connection there somewhere. Because I knew, obviously I had to do my homework before you came on, but I knew a lot about you anyway, because we've been in the same circles you've been up here, but I've been tagging along. So
no, not at all.
So when I'd seen the comparative philosophy, I was like, man, wow, how does that fit in there? It doesn't really fit in. And you've got another book with, is it John DePoe?
Yes.
Yeah.
So
I didn't even know about that book.
Yes. So I have. So this is the Cambridge one that I think you mentioned earlier. Sorry.
Yeah, that's the one I have. I have the real thin one.
Yeah, and then John DePoe and I edit and then both contribute to a 5 views book on religious epistemology.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, the camera there. And that's with Bloomsbury. And so basically in it, we basically just, one person's a classical foundationalist, John. Another person is a phenomenal conservatism. That's Logan Gage and Blake McAllister. There's someone who does a sort of applies McIntyre's view of perspectivalism to epistemology, and so we have him, and we have Scott Oliphant doing covenantal presuppositionalism sort of stuff, and then I represent Reformed epistemology, and we all have an intro chapter, and then we all respond to each other, and then we all the person gets to respond to everyone who responded to him. And
nice.
Yeah, that's the
book. I didn't think very many people were actual classical foundationalists anymore.
Not many, but there are.
How do they respond to Plantinga's?
Right. So John, for example, has a paper. I think might be with like South African journal, South African philosophy, something like that. It's been a while since I looked at it, but basically, he'll say, well, what Plantinga has done is he's basically just assumed there are no good arguments for classical foundationalism. And so, John DePoe doesn't take it that classical foundationalism is like an incorrigible truth, but, nonetheless, he develops an argument. So Plantinga, he's like, too fast, Plantinga. Here's an argument, right, for classical foundationalism. And, he thinks it's the only sort of epistemic theory that can secure a tight connection to truth while also making sense of our internal rationality. And so the 4 other contributors in the book are like, no, that's my theory. No, not your theory, right? And we all have fun with each other trying to, show that our theory is better than the other.
I saw your response in your book with about incorrigible beliefs and
right
and foundationalism, and I think you were pretty modest and pretty good. You didn't really hammer it. You just like, hey, there could be, but why accept it? And I'm like, right. Why accept it? That's I don't have a reason to accept it. It's one of those that sound fantastic on the surface of it, but once you start peeling the layers back, and it's like, Well, yeah, let's say it doesn't hold up to its own criteria, and then we got to argue over, is the argument, incorrigible truth, or, it just, yeah. So I'm with you. I'm just like, why even? I mean, there's too much there to try to defend when there's other avenues that you can take that to me seems at least prima facie easier.
Right. So like some of my main worries is like, can we really make sense of how animals and infants know things, and young children know things, right? Because they're not making inferences, right? And the idea with classical foundationalism is that you have to make an inference unless it's an incorrigible belief. And so, let's say that the idea that objects don't disappear when you look away, right? I mean, that's a belief that seems just natural to somewhat sophisticated animals. Or what about like a child age 3? They, according to cognitive science, they have a fully developed understanding of other minds. Like, are we really to say that they're making inferences to come to this conclusion that other minds exist, or is it more like they get into a certain environment, have a certain experience that moves their faculties in such a way as to produce the belief that someone's there, right? So dogs seem to have knowledge, right? The ball's right here, right? Or that you're a good boy, right? Or that Whataburger is in my hand.
Oh. You had to go there.
And so like they know stuff, but they know stuff because their faculties are functioning properly and they're successfully aimed at truth, not because they're doing some sort of inference or Bayesian calculation. And there's a little bit of a debate in the literature about, are we all just subconsciously, Bayes? Are our brains Bayesed? And I think the literature on that has very much persuaded me that that's not the case. And so, you go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that's what I was telling, Dr. Liz Jackson last week was I just found that I was Bayesian, because I've always looked at things in probability, as a probability, and I found comfort in statistics and things like this. And so when I started learning about, being a probabilist, it was like, oh, that's what I am. That's it right there, And of course, now claiming that I'm a Bayesian epistemologist, now I'm getting all kinds of like objections left and right. And I was like, man, it just seems to be the most natural thing for me. Leave me alone. So
you have those sorts of considerations. Obviously, if you're not a fan of thinking that we have infallible beliefs, classical foundationalism is kind of a non-starter.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I just don't see why it's necessary. Like when I think of the proper functional conditions being met and a belief being formed in light of these, it seems like I have a tight connection to truth, and I think there are absolutely good responses to show how cases like the Norman clairvoyant case. Or other cases that try to show you need internal rationality, that a proper functionalist has tools to make sense of that. And so, I'm not persuaded by the classical foundationalist position. And I think it's interesting. I mean, it doesn't mean it's false. Of course not. Right. That's not the case. But, most people in epistemology and the analytic tradition, the mainstream, rejects it. And I do think that's something interesting, something at least to consider as you're weighing everything in.
That's not an ad populum fallacy, guys. Well, it's what I'm starting to notice is in the Western analytic tradition, there are people want to take a specific path, and they kind of like in theories of truth, and it's not that the correspondence theory is right, and these other different ideas that there's one that fits the best, but none of them get the job done. I think we can kind of take from all of them and get like a meta theory of truth, and that seems to be, at least in my experience in epistemology, like, you know, you were talking about, you know, you could be one in justification and the other in warrant. We don't have to grab a horn and just ride it, you know, all the way through. We can look at different ideas and put them together. And that's kind of, and that's what I love about your work. And that's what I like about Andrew Moon's work. And, you know, in, you know, talking of planning guy, once I grasped the idea, it was like, well, that is so simple. And it makes so much sense. I mean, if your mind is functioning properly, and you find yourself with a belief that you didn't reason yourself to, you didn't have evidence for it, you just found yourself with a belief, and it's aimed at truth, and you fulfilled your epistemic duty, what else is there? I mean, it's like you've kind of covered all the bases. In the absence of defeaters, why am I not warranted or justified? You know,
and you can even construe evidence really weakly to where it's just like, yeah, the experience, you know, that's evidence, and I have experience of it, so that's my evidence for it, right? And so, yeah, again, you can take a little bit of evidentialism, right, and and bring that into picture. Anyway, so.
So I got to ask, since we keep bringing up Dr. Moon, who's smarter, you or him?
Oh, Andrew, for sure.
Well, you guys are.
Andrew is a good friend of mine. He's in fact, I think we might hopefully hang out in a couple months. So he's in Virginia, and so I'm not too far from him. So. Yeah,
you guys are pretty much regulars on Capturing Christianity. So it's I've learned a lot from you guys. It's I mean, Cameron's done such a great thing over there. It's in the beginning when he started Capturing Christianity, I had no idea it would turn into what it is.
I know. I mean, he contacted me. I was the first person he interviewed, the first philosopher he interviewed, and so he was like, "Hey, I'm in Houston. I'd like to interview you." And I was just like, "Yeah, sure. Let's do it." And so he came to my office, and we did the interview, and I was just like, "Oh, this is cool. Okay, let's see where you go with this." And I hope that your ministry will do well. And then just like Cameron became a friend of mine, and we just kind of kept up with each other. And then all of a sudden it's just like within a year of that, it just blows up, and God's just moving in so many ways on so many different people through the ministry. And it's been great to watch. And I really praise God for Cameron and all of what he's done.
I have gotten Dr. Graham Oppie and Dr. Richard Carrier on my show before Cam. That's busy. I still haven't got, but he's so busy, man. It's I asked him.
How was Richard Carrier on the show?
He was a blast, man. I even though I pretty much disagree with everything. I don't, like I was telling you, I don't do the debates and things. I just want to learn about the people, man. He's a character, man. He is.
Yeah. He's a guy I want to meet. I would like I would like to meet. And then Oppie, we've never met either. I'd like to meet both those people, but one day.
I am. Yeah. Oppie may be an atheist, but I love the mess out of Oppie. He is by far one of my favorite philosophers.
He's a kind guy.
Yeah. He's so humble. He's so kind. He's brilliant. And it's just like, we need you on our team. Come on. Stop holding out.
Yeah.
Well, I have next week I have Dr. Richard Price or Dr. Robert Price. The original mythicist.
Yeah.
That's gonna be fun. He's a character too. So we'll see about that.
Fun stuff.
What Cameron doesn't know is I'm going to pull a Cameron. I'm going to his conference, and I'm going to have my video camera, and I'm going to be like, "Hey, would you like to do an interview?" So watch.
Hey, we gotta keep up the hustle, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. I got to, ride off the backs of my friends because I don't have much to offer. So.
Well, one last thing on that topic of Reformed epistemology, what some of your viewers might not know is. Not only is it natural to you, but according to cognitive science of religion, it's natural to all of us.
Absolutely.
And so the paradigm view is that it's that belief in the supernatural is an evolutionary spandrel, byproduct of certain advantageous evolutionary factors, right? To put it very bluntly and quickly. So there's one main theory is that we all have this hyper agency detection device that we see teleology even when it's not there.
Right.
Deborah Kilman calls this promiscuous teleology, right? And so they've done various studies, right, where they've asked people like, why are rocks pointy? And they'll have teleological explanations like, so people won't sit on them. And so like, so animals don't sit on them, and people prefer teleological explanations, and there's been studies that have shown that people prefer teleology and sense teleology cross cultures. So it's not like a Western theism thing. It's right. There's a nice edited volume that just really investigates China, and are these results going to be the same, and so forth. And so the idea is that maybe we have this hyper agency detection device. We see agency even when it's not there. An organism that's going to see agency a lot more than an organism that doesn't see it enough, right, is going to be much better shaped to survive, right?
Right.
So maybe you look at a beautiful starry sky, or the ocean move, or picking up a delicate flower and looking at all of its intricacies. And you just might find yourself believing God made this, or some agent made this, right? And I've had those sorts of religious experiences as well, where I pick up a flower and I'm just, in nature, and I'm just like blown away looking at its texture, and I'm just sense design. Like design just overwhelmingly, consumes me. So yeah, it's not only natural for you, but for everyone. I think it fits quite well with what science tells us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a fantastic point. I've done a lot of almost as much reading in psychology as philosophy, because my younger brother's schizophrenic, and I've had anxiety and depression disorder for many, many years. So just wanting to know more about the mind and how it works. And I've read quite a few articles that we have this like sixth sense that like this, there's this section of our brain that's like programmed to automatically believe in a God or higher being or spirits or things
supernatural,
of this nature.
right?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's and you're right, it's very close to, or fits very well with proper functionalism or reformed epistemology, because if there is a sensus divinatus, then it makes sense that we would be inclined to believe,
Right.
And it's funny because you were talking about the looking at the flower thing, and my wife and I started to watch the
Walking Dead. Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, the Tomorrow War.
Oh, yes.
So we started watching that, and then it got into a discussion about the theory of time, and then it got into the theory of relativity, and then ultimately to quantum mechanics, and the next thing we're watching space-time videos. And then after the space-time videos, I saw this thing. It was Hubble pictures in 4K with like music and all of this, and she was like, "Oh, click on that," and so we're sitting there for 30 minutes just watching space pictures, and we kind of looked at each other, and I was like, how can people not believe in a God or some kind of higher power? Because it's just, it is that awe-inspiring and of course it's just a natural response to
your environment.
To me at least, that I'm just like, wow, there's no way that's just happenstance, that just, it's too beautiful, it's too gorgeous,
So now you need to find a really beautiful Catholic cathedral, and you'll have the same exact experience in there. And if you're consistent with one, just go with the other. So.
Well, somehow I knew you'd bring it around to Catholicism. That's fantastic. So I got to know who's your, and you get, just like I told Dr. Jackson, you only get to pick one. Who's your favorite philosopher, most influential.
This isn't going to be any secret. I've been planning to go.
There you go. She gave me some names I had to look up.
Okay.
But it was on purpose. It was like, I didn't want to use cliche names, And
if you were going to extend the list at all, probably Aquinas would be the next influential person.
Yeah, so. He is phenomenal for sure. So, the best director for Star Wars, which one?
I'm gonna get in some trouble for this. I actually think that J.J. Abrams saved the Star Wars franchise after Episode 8.
Wow.
I thought Episode 8 did a real big disservice to the trilogy, and like overall the trilogy gets like a C. But it would have been like a D if J.J. Abrams didn't do that, I think.
Yeah. Oops. I'm knocking my mic around. So I'm actually surprised because I've seen so many sites that argue everybody but J.J. Abrams.
Right.
And I'm like,
right.
I'm a George Lucas guy, and the reason
sure.
the original. I'm gonna be honest with you. I just really didn't get into the later series. It was 70s and 80s for me, and I just couldn't get into the other ones like I did. So I mean, we lived it. It was Star Wars was everything,
right? Right.
But I'm probably a little bit older than you too. So,
well, I had a Luke Skywalker action figure and Darth Vader action figures, and I had the very first lightsabers that they like made toys, that extended, and I watched the mess out of those. And I remember I was so excited because they had like this like going back, so somewhere around like 1996 or 7, all the movie theaters started playing Star Wars 4, 5, and 6. And they were all coming back to the movie theaters and stuff. And I thought that was like an awesome. They were like digitalizing and making everything better. But yeah, I mean, I think the storyline of the original 3 is the best.
Yeah.
Graphic wise though, and like the aesthetics,
the
aesthetics, I like the sequel. But for the kind of world and just kind of ideas that pop in, then the prequels, I actually like those sort of that world. I want to spend more time in that world where there's Jedis everywhere and the Empire is really at bay,
So your favorite actor out of all of the Star Wars? Come on, there's only one.
Mark Hamill.
No, Harrison Ford. Come on, man. Come on. There's not anybody else.
I was gonna say whoever voices Yoda, maybe. I don't know.
Oh yeah, Yoda. Yeah.
Yoda and Chewbacca. Those are my guys.
I can actually do Chewbacca too, but
can you?
Yeah,
you sure? You don't want to? Do you need to have another drink in order to do that?
Yeah, I got to have a couple more drinks.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things you got to kind of warm up and then do it because it sounds stupid if you just pop out and do it.
I got you.
Yeah, so I got.
I can also do a really good Smeagol, but I won't do that here either.
So before you go, we try to keep it around an hour. I got to know a little bit about Macau. How was it? Were you there with the family or by yourself?
Yes, both.
Oh, okay, okay.
So originally, I got there for 2 or 3 months, and then they came, and then COVID happened, and we came back to America thinking it was just going to be a few weeks, maybe a month or two, and it would pass over. My Dr. Macau told me that's what he thought it was going to happen, and so then all of a sudden it starts to get out of China and start going elsewhere in the world, and I was like, I need to get back to Macau before they close the borders. And my wife's like, well, I didn't get to see my parents, so I want to see them. So I'll just be a little longer, and you make sure it's safe over there. And once you figure out that it's safe in Macau, then we'll come over. So I got over there, and within like 2 weeks, they shut down all the borders. And no one could get back in, even if you live there. only if you were a resident, a permanent resident there.
Right.
And so we were separated for 9 months. And finally in November, I was able to see that my rector of my university was super kind and said, go home to your family.
Wow.
So I've been teaching online since November. And I still pay rent there. I still have my stuff, a lot of my stuff there. So I know we're planning to go back as soon as they open up, but it's just a question of whenever they will open up.
So it looks like it's a beautiful country.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love Macau. It's beautiful. The culture there is like a fusion of West and East. Nice Christian Catholic population, nice Buddhist population. It's so you see statues of Mary just like all around town or churches all around town, and or crosses, and then at the same time you'll see like Buddhist temples or kind of fused Buddhist Taoist etc. temples all around, and beautiful mountains and the oceans there, obviously the South China Sea. So it's a fantastic place to be, and I definitely miss it.
Heck, is it like a 24-hour 3-stop
flight
to get there?
Yes.
Yeah, we had one of our customers was going to put a site in Shenzhen. Yes. I'm very close to there. Yeah, and so it like got right up to almost booking the flights and stuff, and I'm just like looking at it going, oh my gosh, I cannot spend that long on an airplane. It's, I got to call the doctor and be like, hey man, you got some good drugs?
So I got immune to flying when I lived in Scotland, and we would come back and forth visiting from the
Scotland.
UK. And
I didn't know you lived there.
Yeah. For 3 years, we lived in Scotland for 3 years. And,
Glasgow, that's right.
Going back and forth, and I was like, okay, it takes like 12, 14 hours,
Oh wow,
and then so it's just like add another 7, and you can go to China.
Well, I won't complain about my flights to California anymore. The first year I was with this company, I was gold with 3 different flights. Or 3 different airliners, and I was like, okay, this is not what I signed up for. You guys are going to have to do something. And a couple of years later, it finally died down, and now it's not too bad. Every few months I'll take a couple flights or something, but it's such a hassle, man. It's I just drains me,
especially because California doesn't have Tex-Mex or Whataburger. So I mean that's
yes. Oh, the Whataburger thing. Okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted. So I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee. We had a Whataburger when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And then they kind of like drew back all the franchises. So
right.
I didn't have it. We moved to Northwest Arkansas, where we are now, about 10 years ago. And I work in Tulsa a lot. And there were a couple of Whataburgers there. So I wore out Whataburger. I loved it, Well, then they built one here in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and my wife and them hadn't had it near as much as me. And I'm just like, man, I can't do Whataburger again. I can't. And that's all they ever want. Let's go to Whataburger. And the line is like, down and out the road. And
but
it's like
at least
Chick-fil-A.
in Texas. Yeah, but at least in Texas, just like Chick-fil-A is quick.
Yes. Yeah. No, not here. No, they're terrible.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Okay. Chick-fil-A, like they have streamlined it. It's
Chick-fil-A is quicker. I agree. Chick-fil-A is quicker, but the lines for Whataburger to me aren't like horrible, like the length of time you spend.
Yeah, no, it's pretty terrible here. Most of them, it's not. You're right. I mean, I've been, all over Oklahoma and Texas, and I think it's just a here thing. So.
Maybe because there's just like not enough Whataburgers there,
Yes. They built that one, and then about 6 months later, I built one on the other side of Fayetteville. And now the one on the other side of Fayetteville, you can get in and get out with no problem. But this one is right by the college.
I'm more excited to go to Arkansas now. Now, when I drive through from North Carolina to Texas in a few months, I will definitely be keeping my eye out for Arkansas. Arkansas.
Well, I don't. You'll be on 40, and I don't know if you're going to find very many Whataburgers up there. We're up in the corner. It's kind of like everybody up here because Walmart's headquarters is here. Tyson Chicken's headquarters is here. Right. Everybody's from California, Texas, somewhere else, So we kind of have our own unique economy up here. But yeah, I don't even think you'll find one on 40 till you get into Texas, maybe. So that's gonna suck for you, but
just an extra 4 or 5 hours without. There you go.
The whole In-N-Out versus Whataburger, I don't get it because I've had a lot of In-N-Out and it's nothing spectacular either. And I'm like, yeah, no, okay, it's you have both of them. But thank you so much for coming on, right, Dr. McNabb. Man, I have enjoyed it. I love your work.
That's very kind of you.
And I am humbled and honored that you would come on our little show. But
it's very kind of you, and very much enjoyed it. And hopefully your show continues to flourish and succeed and help people.
I appreciate it. I hope it does. We'll be famous one day, and then you can say, "Hey, I was on that guy's show."
Right? They're going to be like, "Who are you?"
That's right. Yeah. That ain't going to happen. So, thank you so much for your time, man. I enjoyed it. Have a great evening. I'm gonna see everybody out. You can hang out in the backstage if you want. If you got to go, I understand. So,
all right. Well, thank you very much, man.
All right, no problem, boss. Have a good one. Dr. Tyler McNabb. If you like epistemology, you'll love his work, especially as much as you've heard me talk about reformed epistemology. I know there's a lot of guys there in the chat that's tired of hearing about reformed epistemology, but Plantinga and then McNabb and Andrew Moon does fantastic work carrying on the torch. As usual, thank you, Pasta Mike, with Normalizing Atheism. All of the artwork, the logos, the introduction video, the cutaways I haven't got to use much lately. We're going to incorporate it somehow, but check him out. He has Normalizing Atheism on YouTube, and he has a Facebook group, which is Normalizing Atheism Facebook group. And he does phenomenal editing jobs, and his videos over there are top notch. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Next week, I have Dr. Robert Price, the OG of mythicism. He is a character. He is going to be fun. I promise you do not want to miss Dr. Price next week for sure. Have a good evening, everybody.